I feel that one of the main differentiating skills between intermediate and advanced commander players is threat assessment. And while obviously this could be just another video telling you, remove X problematic permanent or your opponents will run away with the game, that's not the point of this video. I'm aiming to address not threat assessment in piloting, but actually in deck building. I've been playing exclusively $25 budget decks in casual EDH for the past few years, and it's taught me several lessons about the correlation between perceived strength of cards and how that draws attention from the table. A good example of this you may be able to relate to is how the green ramp deck can greed extremely hard in the early game and blitz out the gate making tons of mana, but as soon as the player who's been missing land drops decides to throw down a Grand Arbiter, suddenly they are the threat. Even though realistically the odds of them winning aren't that high, people fear them because they know how this can punish them if it's left unchecked. The green ramp deck may be a problem, but that'll take 2 more turns. If you untap with this now, surely we'll lose the game here and now. Anecdotally, I went to the card shop a while ago and played against someone that jammed super staples in their deck. Nothing but demonic tutors, cabal coffers, all the high budget crazy cards, but ultimately his deck lacked purpose. He didn't have an idea of what his deck was going to do if everyone else decided to focus on removing his powerful pieces, and he didn't factor that in that this might happen if he plays all these staples. I've personally never seen this guy actually win a game, and even asked why his deck wasn't working. This answer may reflect some of your decks at home, and it comes down to attention. EDH is fundamentally a different format than that of others with the multiplayer aspect. In 1v1 formats, you just play the strongest things, and if you don't, you lose to them. But there's a significant amount of nuance in the fact that this format is inherently a free-for-all. You've probably heard the age-old, your opponents are only enemies when their threats are directed at you, but if they're directed elsewhere, they're your allies. But taking this a step further, we can analyze why they aren't targeting you. Time and time again, it can be seen that the player that has been stumbling all game long comes in after this long, drawn out battle and sneaks in for the victory. Why is that? They weren't threatening. When everyone else is gunning it for the finish line and handicapping each other to blitz out a win, they bided their time. This is where budget brewing has its advantage in play. Not only do people know that I'm physically unable to run most super staples due to my budget restrictions, but they can also see that my value engines aren't nearly as strong as theirs. When they can only remove a set amount of things, they'd much rather push the button on the person that's mouth is salivating, just itching for an opening to push for a win, rather than the one who's just playing less efficient value engines. Due to our cards being perceived as worse, we get away with a lot more. There's an inherent tolerance to what a playgroup will allow before they finally deem you as the threat. And we need to stay under this radar, otherwise we'll be forced to deal with stray removal spells, combat damage, and other ploys to knock us off our throne. If you notice, the first person to get ahead in the game faces tons of consequences, but also usually doesn't die. They get their stuff blown up, they take lots of damage, but at the end of it all, are just left handicapped while everyone turns their attention to the next biggest threat. This is also why I advocate for running more removal. In both situations, running more removal would have helped. For starters, we are running cards that are for the most part considered worse than our super staple jamming counterparts. We need to be able to also contribute to this need, to make sure our opponents don't just run away with the game. It doesn't matter if we were biding our time, if they are allowed to spit their entire deck out onto the field and swing at us for lethal long before we're ever truly set up. On this same token, if our opponents had enough removal, then our strategy wouldn't be allowed to go unchecked. Notice how I didn't say that it would be hard countered, but it would at least be addressed. For this reason, I also recommend diversifying removal suites. Removal falls into 4 main functions. Instant speed, which is handy for being efficient, easy to hold up, and stopping opponents from making huge bombastic plays on their turns. Board wipes, which are used to clear away entire board states, notably including the quote-unquote worse value engines. Removal engines, which has the entire purpose of acting as repeatable removal to proactively invest resources now to deal with potential threats in the future and provide outsized returns. And finally, versatility. This would be your classic feed the swarm. It's not good, but you run it anyways to deal with problematic permanent types. Now that I've got the piloting philosophy out of the way, I want to put an emphasis on the deck building side. When you deck build, there will be times that you're tempted to put in cards because they're stronger, but there needs to come a line of questioning that comes with including these stronger cards, and especially so if it includes your commander and its game plan. You can ask, what will my opponent think when I cast this spell? How much attention will this draw my way? It's important to analyze because stronger cards tend to have a higher perceived threat level and are more likely to eat a removal spell or have you be the one targeted. Will my deck be set up enough to handle the amount of attention this receives? This matters immensely because if your deck appears big and scary, but doesn't have the actual threat behind it to close out the game through everyone's targeting, you've cooked a recipe for disaster. And lastly, how will my opponent's knowledge of this card being in my deck affect their play patterns when interacting with and playing against my deck in the future? If we run a quick hypothetical, we can consider Zaxara the Exemplary. This card's cool, makes Hydras, makes mana, whatever. Ultimately, shouldn't be the biggest, scariest thing usually, but that's definitely not going to be the case if your opponents know that you run Freed from the Real. Now all of a sudden, you can go off at any point. Your quirky little guy needs to be feared and locked down because if you stumble into that piece, all of a sudden you've gone infinite and won the game. Now, rather than that imprisoned in the moon going at someone else, you're gonna have to find yourself out of this situation, all because your opponent is afraid of what could happen. It's a strong card, and when it works, it's great and boosts your win percentage in those games. But in the games that you don't get it, all the added attention and removal is what's making you ultimately lose more percentage points than you're gaining, keeping you from ever getting to truly pop off and do your thing and making your FNMs feel more stale until you resent the deck and disassemble it for something new and shiny. This is just a lesson I've learned as a budget brewer. Playing with cheaper cards has taught me valuable lessons on how to be a fundamentally strong player and good pilot rather than just getting bailed out by the strongest synergies and combos. I've learned how to be more intentional with my deck building and how to gauge whether or not I should cut or include a card purely off what your opponents will think. It's kind of like how once you get to a certain proficiency in a game like chess or Smash Bros, rather than focusing on just what you want to do with your character, you start analyzing what your opponent is thinking, like what ideas they may be having so you can punish them. If you have time to throw something on in the background while driving or doing chores, in this video you can see my deck building philosophies in practice where I actually choose to build around the commander by maximizing cohesion over synergy. I delve much deeper into the ideas of how to make this weak card functional, and I think it can be a valuable watch, and maybe you learn a thing or two. Quick! Join the Discord. It's free and you can change your mind. The world can be lonely sometimes. No harm in finding community. As always, if you like my video and think someone you know may benefit from them, consider sharing it with them, so we can all become better deck builders together. This has been Togo's Rock, and I am out.